I think you need an engineering degree to use StreamYard.
I know.
So,
I know for sure. Since it's just you and I might as well just run that again. Hello and welcome in. Summer Girl Mama, Chai, thank you for manning the fort. Runaway Truth. What else we got here? I thought I saw it. Yep, Music City Mom. Thank you for joining us.
welcome in, welcome in.
Yeah, Masters in StreamYard. Yeah, and I just have the basic edition, so it's amazing. Work for engineering company and I can't even work this thing. So, okay. So I thought tonight, I put out a little video last night. It was probably a little more of a response to some of the things that have been going on, and with the I think just the Q&A that's been happening over the. It sounds like it's a Friday night routine, but I did not see one on last night, and that's probably a good thing because I still haven't absorbed the other ones. But I figured I would maybe go through just at least portions of the Sumner County complaint that Seth filed. Um, there's just so many different components to it, and like we've talked about before, it's so confusing because it's it's a civil rights claim. So typically what we're used to seeing normally is a criminal or civil, like somebody is the neighbor suing their neighbor, and but when you get into this civil rights, um, especially at a federal level, it's a whole different ball game. And because of all of the things that Darren Ritchie put into these complaints that were completely unnecessary, it also becomes more confusing because we really don't know. It's like, why are we here? What are we looking at? What is the real issue here? And I know I've mentioned it before that like a judge would probably look at all of those things that, especially the DCS complaint. There are definitely a lot of details in there that should not even be in there at all. They serve no purpose. Oh, sound is very low. I just got a message from Lynn.
Well, you're hearing the sound. We can just mention that his attorney has also represented other CPS cases. Melody Buzzy, her grandmother, or he reached out to her grandmother, and that it appears to me it's been kicked. I don't know if it made it past summary judgment, but it looks like it did not. He was also involved in the West case of Trezell and Jacqueline. The biological parents wanted to sue the state of California for the adoptive parents unaliving their two children, and then the grandparents were also wanting a resolution. That case was dismissed, although the moms is still in appeals. So this attorney's not new at this. He's chosen this path. I don't know him. I just know that he's well versed in this for some reason, and it doesn't make sense to me at all. Just saying.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out why my sound is so low because it's loud in my ear, so I need to figure out why it's so low here. Does it sound low to you, Chai?
I'm on my phone. I'm not on my headset because I can't figure out how to use it. Honestly, I'll be honest. I don't know how to use it. So I'm on my phone, but I hear you fine.
Huh.
But it probably is low. I mean, if you're on a computer or another device.
Let's see if I can figure out how to get this up. I'm afraid if I take my headset off, it's going to cause an echo.
Oh.
Yeah, because when I test the microphone, it actually comes up pretty loud. So I'm not understanding why it's so low.
It might just be a StreamYard thing.
I don't know.
I know other people over the weekend. Well, I didn't see it yesterday at all, but I think it was Friday. One channel was having a lot of problems with it.
Well, I guess I can try dropping down and or dropping off my headset and see if that helps. But I'm afraid it's going to cause an echo.
Okay.
I just don't know. Let's see if we can try something else here. Okay, is that a little bit louder?
I can hear you okay. I don't know if Lynn can. I know, Summer Girl, I just don't have a quiet voice. I wish I could. I do not.
Is it better here? Can you hear me better now?
I can. Yes, Summer Girl said yes.
Okay, yeah, because I have like 12 places to go to to try to increase the volume with these headsets. Every time I switch between work and home, I end up having to reset everything because of the different headsets. And so, all right, well, hopefully that's a little bit better. Let's see if hopefully it's better.
Hey, Bad Karma, welcome in. All right, thanks for the thumbs up and subbing. And justice appreciates that.
Yes, I definitely do. Thank you so much. Okay. All right, I got two people on different saying that's better. Okay, so we'll kind of back up here. So anyway, what I wanted to go through tonight is a little bit more of not kind of stay out of the opinions and or my opinion anyway, because I think I released enough of my attitude yesterday for for at least at least met the quota for the weekend, but you might see a little bit here. But anyway, I thought, because these complaints are so confusing with it being a, civil rights complaint, that kind of takes a lot of things out of the equation, but it also complicates things, but it is hard to understand because it's not something that we typically see. We don't really see these things very often. We hear, I mean, we see that, the police are getting sued for various reasons, but I think what we see as what we think is a claim is not actually a claim that has any merit to the actual complaint. So that's where it kind of gets a little bit confusing. So I thought, I just I'll put together a little bit of a tutorial. I don't want to really go into we're not going to go into a classroom setting, but at least kind of give some overview because they did throw a lot of stuff in there. Darren Ritchie decided to give us a lot of disgusting details that we did not need to see and Sebastian did not need to have hit the street. And one thing that I figured out today, I just thought I'd share it. I think I told you about it earlier, Chais. Do you remember when these complaints came out, and of course they hit the street, and everybody was reading them, and unredacted for the most part, and so we heard all of these things about Sebastian, and then they said, "Oh, it's going to be sealed." So I thought, "Oh, good thing I have a copy of both of these complaints because if they're sealing these records, we're not going to see it." And then, it would have been good thing because we don't want to see some of these things. I
Right.
thought, so initially I thought, well, maybe they put it out for shock value because you know how they like to throw things out there and, the leakage. That's what I thought maybe they did.
Yeah.
But what I figured out today, because I went in to see if there was any updates, there was a motion to seal, and that got filed in. I think it actually just got ordered maybe like a week or so ago, 10 days ago maybe. But come to find out, what happened is they initially filed these complaints. For sure the DCS, I'm not sure about Sumner County, but they filed these complaints on June 22nd and violated the first basic rule of federal procedure. And apparently they filed it with Sebastian's full name. And that's a big no-no. For across the board, it's a no-no. But especially when you have some of those details in there that they decided to include, you're not supposed to put in the full minor child's name. You're supposed to use initials. And what makes that even worse is thankfully the court caught it because the court did not, I mean, they accepted it, but they basically, locked it down. And they went back to the attorney and made him file an amended complaint, which is why we see the one that says first amended complaint. That's why, is because they made him refile it with using Sebastian's initials instead of his full name. And then they made him file a motion, just procedural, to file a motion to seal the first one. So technically the first one is still in the court, but it's sealed and it won't ever see the light of day, But I thought, so here's this attorney who has been, claiming that he is filing federal lawsuits across the country on behalf of parents and, oh, thank you, Naomi, filing complaints across the nation on behalf of parents and these children, and he doesn't even know the very basic rule. You can't even get past the caption. You can't even get past the plaintiff's name correctly. So, what do we, okay, so I did some research on him before, didn't really find much, just some things here and there. And then when I saw that today, I thought, okay, I'm not really sure where this guy came from, but that is not good news because that is the first thing, And I guess that kind of explains why we see a lot of these humiliating details in there about Sebastian, the poor kid. But he also has a father who signed off on that and allowed it to happen. So there's that. So anyway, we will get into it. And I just thought that was kind of a interesting little bonus there, what I discovered today. So, what is a Monell claim? So, in this complaint, there are actually like two parts to it. So, we see what they call, like Section 1983, which is actually like the claim of your civil rights. So, what they have to decide is, according to Section 1983, were the civil rights violated? So then, what the Monell doctrine is, the Monell claim that they've included in there, is actually where it brings it down to a county level. So they have to decide or determine if a county policy or practice caused that violation. So it's kind of like two layers to that. So basically, he's saying my civil rights were violated, and then because they want to put it on the county as the ones who caused the violation, they have to use that Monell doctrine claim to basically try to reach that threshold. So we, not only do we have something that's even, we need to add another layer of confusion to this, right? So so basically, we have Brandon Carter, Eric Craddock, and Sumner County, and so the questions are for like Carter and Craddock is, what did Carter personally do or fail to do that violated Seth's or Sebastian's federal constitutional rights? Because remember, we have two plaintiffs. This is not only about Seth, it's about Sebastian too. And what about Sebastian, right? I mean, everybody's worried about themselves here, it seems. And then what did Craddock personally do that violated the federal rights? So, what they have to do now is figure out what Seth is basically claiming is that the county has some, because of the county's guidelines and because of the policies and their customs and their practices and their failure to train, that's what caused, basically saying that's what caused Carter and Craddock to behave in the manner that they are, or do things like ignoring tips and things like that. He's trying to say that it was their policies or their actions that caused the officer or the sheriff to violate Seth and Sebastian's constitutional rights. And that's a mouthful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I guess they have to be able to prove. They basically had to bring Craddock in there as a policy maker, even though, when Sebastian disappeared, I would think that any policies that would have been in place would have been Sonny Weatherford. So this is kind of interesting because there is a little bit of a break there. So I'm not really sure how they're planning on handling this in the long run, if there is a long run. So let me get my notes up here. So here we go. The big Monell question is, was this an employee problem or a Sumner County problem? So, they have to decide, if Detective Carter screwed up, and if that becomes Sumner County's liability, because under the qualified immunity actually protects, like, the public workers, like the prison guards and police officers and firemen and stuff like that. It prevents them from, or is supposed to prevent them from being sued civilly, but it doesn't protect them from being sued or from being charged criminally. So it's basically to allow them to make a quick judgment call based on the situation that they're in, and not feel like they are going to lose their house and their bank account if they make a bad call because they had to make a decision at the last minute and ended up turning out bad, So, so yeah, there's something, I wrote here, Seth needs something more. So Sumner County what he's claiming is that they had a policy, custom, practice, or a policymaker decision, which he's blaming on Craddock, that caused the constitutional violation. So I hope we're kind of getting some understanding on this, because it's so layered that it's hard to read it and understand it, and it's hard to explain. So I mean, I read it so many times, and then I kept going back, like, what does that mean? Now, how does that connect? And because it's just, I'm also hearing in the background, there's like this fog in the background, because I've got the actual complaint going through my head too, which has details that we don't need. So you have to be able to filter all of that through. So yeah, if anybody has any questions, just pop them up there in the chat. So what does Seth actually allege? Well, let's see, on any given day, it's hard to tell. So his four main complaints is that they are under-resourcing, failing to maintain communications with families, and failing to coordinate with DCS and other agencies. So we know, because we read the DCS, and where he brought that into being an issue was in that CPIT, where they share this information with other agencies, so everybody kind of at least knows of what's happening, and then they all kind of make a decision together. It is federal. Yeah, it's in the Tennessee. Is it Western District or Eastern District? I'm trying to remember. But yeah, it is a federal. And that's why there's a different set of rules too, because it's under federal rules and not just like not in the regular circuit court. So, and then he says that they just abandoned investigations without a resolution. So I think that we've been hearing, from Seth a lot, especially through his Q&As, to know where he stands on all of that. So if we look at claim number 1, so under resourcing, he alleges that Sumner County had a custom of under-resourcing missing persons investigations. We do know that Tennessee has some challenges, just like some other states. Probably varies by area, I would think, and by county. I don't really hear about a lot of missing people in Sumner County. Do you?
No.
Yeah, I don't.
Craddock did find that little autistic boy. I think he was 4. I can't remember his age, but he found him himself. And that wasn't too long ago.
So, and a lot of this goes on funding. Well, he says only one detective allegedly assigned. How many detectives can be assigned to one? And I know that he worked it heavily in the beginning, and eventually, when the tips kind of dry up, you can't. The county cannot afford, or the state even, they can't afford to assign, one detective per case. And, but because, Seth is definitely upset, and rightly so. We all want to find Sebastian. I don't know why they're so quiet. I mean, I have a good idea why they're quiet, but I think that they at least owe Sebastian. If they would be thinking of Sebastian like we do, I think they owe Sebastian a little bit of courtesy, and at least letting us know where, if they know anything, even if they can't tell us the details, if they at least know anything, like, should we be looking at schools, should we be, if you get the word out across the United States, there's people who are working in hospitals and in schools and in institutions, and we don't know where he is. I mean, if they at least kind of put out a little bit, or at least let the community know that they're safe.
Right.
I mean, if it was a kidnapper, they should know. So what bothers me about it is that the Amber Alert, and, well, first it was runaway, then it was endangered, and then it turned to Amber Alert. And those just don't jive, because we don't have enough information. We don't know what qualified them for each one.
Right.
We know what they say the qualifiers are, what the criteria is. But they're not showing us that that's what they based it off of. I mean, it's kind of like, well, there's Amber Alert. Well, why? Why? What made them turn that into an Amber Alert? What did they see? What do they know? Is it something that we can do, especially after 2.5 years? Give us something. If they think that he's gone and they have any indicator, then at least, let us know.
Right.
And, should we be looking in the woods, or should we be looking at some wilderness camp where they have these kids locked down? And some things we just don't know as a community. We don't know about all these little intricate nooks and crannies that may be around us. Like, I don't know what kind of camps are around you, just like you wouldn't know what kind of camps are around me to understand, like, what the camp is for. Is it a church camp, or is that a camp for naughty kids? Or, those are things that the public, the general public, kind of knows. It just would be nice, at least for Sebastian's sake, to say something. So I do agree with Seth on that.
Yeah.
So, okay, so, apparently he thinks he needs a detective full time. We've been hearing that in the Q&A. Indian Reservation. You know what? I thought about that right after I saw Nina's 2 or 3 hour dissertation on her marriage and divorce. I thought, that kind of, because Seth all of a sudden claimed that he was, didn't he actually change some paperwork to...
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he did.
Kind of makes me wonder, but I don't think they would hide. Never know. Okay, so physical searching allegedly scaled back. Not allegedly, it was. Insufficient resources for Sebastian's risk level. I don't even know what that means. Lack of continuing public updates. We all know what that means. And failure to deploy additional resources. So
I can tell you what the insufficient resources are, because we hear that sometimes for teenagers that run off and things that have autism. He's asking for a specific unit to deal with children that have challenges. Does that make sense?
yeah.
And no county that I know of, or city, because officers are short staffed right now all across the country, and they really don't have that department. Anybody that can just work with special needs missing youth, they just put them all in one category as missing and endangered youth or Amber Alerts. They don't really have any specific anywhere for just to find autistic children. There's seminars, because I've been to them. They're in NCMEC, but I haven't ever seen a special subsection of a department that just dealt with that.
So is it like a so it's actually is it an officer that would have special training, or is it kind of like a social worker that accompanies?
No, it's not the social worker. I'm laughing. No. The social worker usually just works with victims of violent crimes. I mean, it's no secret I work with victims of violent crimes. But it's got to be, I don't have investigative powers. I used to, but I'm retired from that. And so what he wants is a specific division, like just say Carter, that he wanted Carter to be specifically trained to only track children with autism, medical, mental, diabetic, any kind of a child that has a challenge. He wanted them to find resources, just one officer dedicated to that, and they can never do that in any department because they don't have the staffing. I think that'd be a phenomenal idea. I would love it, but it looks realistic. There's just not enough people, and with trafficking and everything going on, it's just not going to happen.
Right. Well, and look, here we are 2.5 years later.
Right.
I mean, can a department, is there funding even at a federal level? Who funds these officers? If they do bring in these specialized officers, where would that funding come from? Because you can't put a full-time officer or detective on one child's case.
No.
So and I just and the officers are so underpaid anyway. And they have a hard job, and then we have parents like, oh, um,
I will say it is very difficult for parents, and I understand that, but I point to Brandy Vaughn, right? Brandy worked and worked and worked with those. She is my hero. I have never seen anyone like Brandy Vaughn fight for her child. She's always been respectful. Whenever they broke, or the news broke that that house down the street was a suspect, her husband had to actually physically restrain her from going down there. And I respect that because I'm sure I would have done the same thing as most moms would. But she did not have one detective assigned to her child either. Does that make sense?
hmm
I mean, one detective gets like 15 cases.
right, right, yeah. So I mean, technically, they're part-time on every
Right.
case, and you just take it as ebbs and flows. And if you don't have any tips, I mean, we don't want to be like certain um, creators who like make up tips to keep themselves busy.
That's
That's
accurate.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So if the tips
Yeah.
are low, what are we supposed to do here? Um, so yeah, Monell asks that bigger question is, where's evidence that this was a custom of Sumner County rather than a decision made in Sebastian's particular investigation? So, that could become a major discovery issue because Sumner County may respond like one investigation does not establish a county-wide custom. And they could argue resource allocation varies from case to case, and assigning one lead detective doesn't necessarily mean only one officer worked on the investigation. And scaling back physical searches isn't the same as abandoning an investigation. And the complaint identifies Sebastian's case, but it does not identify other missing persons cases treated the same way, which is interesting. So we're going to see that later.
Right.
So, the defense is going to say, well, show us a pattern. Because you're saying this is a custom, you're saying that this is a policy. So if it's not, if it's a custom or it's a policy, then this should be being applied in the broader spectrum to all the cases, right?
Right.
So Seth has that burden. If Seth says this is a custom, then Sumner County can ask, what other cases demonstrate that custom? So this is going to be a tough one for him. Let me see here. So the claim number 2. Well, we all know this one. So the Monell claim alleges that a policy or practice of failing to maintain communication with families of missing persons. And this will go right back to the same thing that I just said, is that he has to prove that this is a custom, a policy, and it applies to everybody. So, and he does say that his own communication with Sumner County stops, and I have absolutely no doubt about that.
Right.
I think that there's a power struggle there. I think there's definitely arrogance maybe on both parts, but I
Right.
think it's more of you have two very strong-willed. You have Seth, who's very strong-willed, and then you have, whether it be Craddock or just Sumner County as a whole, they're very strong-willed too. And if there's a lot of chaos, and I know that me personally, hi Krama, I am one of those that if there's a lot of chaos
Trauma.
going on, yeah, I'm gonna shut down.
Sure.
That's just my personality. I would rather, because if I don't shut down, you're probably not gonna like what happens next. Because
In my
I might tell you a little bit about yourself.
in my perspective, they can't talk to him because of the people he associated with. Right? Like
hmm
he was saying he refused to meet with the police officers unless Tony was there. And then at night got involved. Well, they can't tell a felon on active supervision anything. And I've seen a lot of a lot of felons that have redemption, right? Some of them are doing really great things in life. I don't
Hmm.
see that with Nick ever. I'm just throwing that out there. And the things that this kid has done to diminish this case by telling people don't call law enforcement, call dog,
Hmm.
don't do this, call 1-800 manhunt. And he diverted this whole case. So law enforcement is confused because they're like, why are you not telling them to call the FBI, or why are you not telling them to call the TBI? If you don't like Sumner, okay, call someone, but
Hmm.
don't call a felon on active parole.
Well, and there's, you can't follow the chain on a tip. Like what was changed, where'd it go, where'd it come from, and I think that's I
Yes.
I I don't know for sure, but just from what I was hearing from some of the channels and some of the things that were coming out of those channels, and I sent that to TBI and I sent that to Sumner County, and Carter's not responding to me, and I'm thinking I can understand why they would just
Sure.
rather not. They can't entertain it because if they were to entertain, if just my perception of the stuff that was going into those email boxes and into the maybe the Blanche's, whoever the lady is that retired, Blanche's voicemail was where the tip line was. Her voicemail may be full, but I think they have a they have to figure out what is a valid tip and what isn't. And honestly, in this case, that could have been a full time job of somebody just trying to sort those out. And so there's that. To me, and in my opinion, there's a level of danger in this where you have so many that you just become complacent. Just like
Right.
don't really even pay attention anymore. You kind of skim. Oh my gosh, there's that Crime Time Buzz lady again sending me, because some of these creators made themselves the carrier pigeon of all information to Sumner County. And then when they didn't get a response, they were following up and, going up the chain to try to complain. And it just turned into mania. And, I was kind of following the green team a little bit for the first couple months that I was looking into this until
Uh-huh.
I saw the craziness. And I was like, I, I don't know if I should be more scared that this is actually happening or more scared that you believe it and there's all these people sitting in this chat that actually believe it. They believe it. The craziest thing, like I saw even last night, maybe the dumpster's heavy because there's sand from or dirt from the cemetery in it.
What?
Yes, yes, I saw that in Mob Crew's chat. And, this,
Oh
you
my.
know, how much fun is if somebody's brain works like that? How much fun is their world?
Right.
They just must because there's just like this little tiny circus going on up there all the time. So you just know they're having a lot of fun in life, but
Sure.
don't put it into a chat. I'm just gonna like some things you
Right.
just gonna like write
Keep
yourself
to
a note.
yourself.
Yeah, you just write yourself a note,
Right.
unhand the keyboard. So anyway, so I think a lot of these things with Seth's claims, Sumner County is just going to come back and say, there's no such policy, and that burden is on Seth to prove that there is. So and they'd say, nope, there's no widespread custom either. So, and then the defense, for on behalf of Sumner County, they could produce, all the written communication, victim family liaison, or what does Seth call them? Liaisons. Um,
Yes.
I don't remember what he calls them now. It was so funny. Victim family liaisons, emails, call logs, meetings, communications with Seth, communications with other family members, and then they can give examples from other missing persons cases, and that shows right there that it's not a custom, it's not a policy. And even if the communication was poor, what federal constitutional right did that violate? Because bad communication and unconstitutional conduct are not automatically the same thing. So
Sure.
this is this is going to be definitely an uphill battle for them. I do hope that it does spark some information and maybe motivate them to at least help us help them, or at least give us some idea of where this poor kid is, even if they
Right.
don't know for sure, but I mean, if they think he's in Canada, good, you know. If we if they think he's in
Sure.
Canada and he's okay, I'm good with him being in Canada and okay. Just tell us
Right. As
something,
long as he's okay.
Mhm.
Right.
Yep. So then here we go with Sumner County. They have a custom of failing. This is another claim. Failure to coordinate with DCS and other agencies, and and I think that's kind of like what he was saying in his Q&A is, you know, had they called me, my if they would have just called me,
But
and
there
so
were, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I mean, there were two reports, and he admitted he knew the first one. Right. And the second one, you can comment on that, but I I think that's going to be a little hard for him to uphold in court. For one thing, Sumner County did meet with DCS and all other agencies in the prosecutor's office. Right after that, they talked about it. That's policy. They have that team. It starts with a C, and I can't
CPIT,
remember.
yeah,
And
CPIT.
so they are working together.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a little good. That's going to be a little barrier for him. What he's trying to say is he wanted Chris prosecuted for spanking his son with a belt. I've heard him say that. And it's not illegal in the state of Tennessee. So that's going to be another uphill battle for him. I mean, if that's what he's still wanting,
Yeah,
because they're not going to prosecute Chris for spanking him with a belt because there's no law to prevent it. Now, there's a law that it said, if I remember right, no marks or bruises after 24 hours or 12 hours or something in Tennessee, and they can file charges. Well, obviously, he didn't have um, any marks or bruises when the CPS people got there.
yeah. And and they actually had that one marked as a priority three, which I know three does not exist anymore. But so that was not really marked as being an urgent matter, and I mean they still had to follow up with it. I think within 3 days, if I remember correctly. But um, they did not. Sebastian's, that was the one that he totally self-disclosed. He's like, yeah, I wasn't brushing my teeth and I wasn't making my bed and I was lying about it. The kid just spilled. He just told them like all the reasons why he could
Right.
justify why they were upset. More information than they even knew walking in the door. God bless that little kid.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, well, Seth leaked that he knows about the September 20 of 2022 report the report because of the SRO officer. The resource officer at the school. Now, I've heard him tell the story two different ways. First, he said, like, he knew about it, and then he made it sound like he had to go in there and, when they called him about something that Sebastian did, then he pulled them aside and was like, hey, this is what happened in California. And then he made it sound like that's what prompted the call. And then when he told it a different way, um, he almost made it sound like he knew about it because of the conversation. And he kind of alluded that it already happened. But either way, he said he knew it. Now, I found something, and I don't know why I skimmed over this a couple times. In the DCS report, for anybody who has a copy of it, I just will not pull these things up on my screen because they're. For anybody who has it, the DCS complaint in paragraph 12, it says defendant Laura Boswell was at all relevant times a case manager at DCS, and it conducted the face-to-face interviews with Sebastian, the Proudfoot family, and Seth Rogers on both the 2022 investigation and the 2023 investigation.
But is that unusual?
Seth
I
is
think
saying Seth is saying that he didn't even know. First, he's saying he didn't know about either one, and then he leaked through his Q&A that he knew about 2022 because he most likely prompted that one. And now, when I was reading back through this complaint again, I thought, oh my gosh, is this a typo, Darren? But it says on both 2022 and 2023 that this is his attorney saying that this CPS worker spoke with Seth regarding both of these reports.
Wow.
Yeah. It's paragraph 12 for anybody who really wants to go and look at it. Because I have a whole, we know about me and my spreadsheets, but I have a whole spreadsheet of all these little discrepancies. And I happened to be looking at something on the spreadsheet and I thought, oh my gosh, how did I overlook that? And I went back and looked, but I think it's because this complaint is so poorly written and so clunky that I probably just skimmed past it. And plus with the details that are in there, it's really hard to read. But anyway, yeah, I found that today and I thought, both, huh? You might want to include that in your next Q&A. But, so for this claim number 3, if Sumner County was participating with DCS through CPIT, what exactly was the county-wide failure to coordinate policy or custom? So was coordination absent, or does Seth believe the coordination that occurred was inadequate? And those are not the same thing. So
Right.
their likely defense will kind of be like interagency coordination. And then they're going to ramble off every agency that they worked with, TBI, DCS, FBI, CPIT, other law enforcement, all other law enforcement agencies, and
Equisearch.
Yep, forensic resources. And so that creates an important distinction, So they didn't coordinate versus they coordinated, but Seth disagrees with how they investigated. So, and Monell does not exist to let a federal court decide whether investigators made every decision the way a plaintiff thinks they should have.
Right.
So, the issue has to come back to an actual constitutional violation caused by a municipal policy or custom. And that's what his claims are. And that's why it's so confusing. So
Sure.
it gets convoluted and it seems like it should be so simple. So, okay, so his next grievance is abandoning the investigations.
Never happened. They're still taking tips. So I'm not sure how he said that the investigation was abandoned. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No. And I think just as the public was a little bit confused, and that's why I think we're still confused to this day a little bit, is because there was the largest search in Tennessee history was happening, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Boop, we're shutting down the field. We're just gonna go into investigation mode and not necessarily search mode. Like boots on the ground search mode." And I think that does shock us to the core of how did this thing go from being so widespread to in the office.
Right.
And I think that may be where some of the confusion really is with all of us, because we don't know what's prompting these different stages, or
Sure.
We don't even know what made them think that he was endangered. Was that just because of the medical challenges?
I've never thought that. I mean, just based on, I know you and I have talked, and I know it's like, I need to quit talking about it, but I believe, because, when I was a sex offender officer all those years, the amount of time it takes to dump the electronics from the Secret Service to the time that the Amber Alert was entered, I feel like they found something. Maybe he found a friend. That's just my opinion. I could be very wrong, but I've seen that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not so much Amber Alerts, but in arrests. I mean, it takes a certain amount of hours for stuff to come out. I mean, on like child porn cases. And as soon as they dump the devices, that's the same amount of time it takes to it just seems all relevant to me that they may have found something in the electronics. That's just my opinion. He's smart. He's 15. He can bust through a firewall.
Yeah. And look at what Thomas Medlin did. His mom thought he had one account, and come to find out he had, what, 4 or 5?
Yes,
On Roblox. Remember that, Cromwell?
absolutely.
Yeah, because we were like staring down this bridge, and come to find out, the little stinker. Yeah.
Right,
Jeez, outwit, outsmart, outplay these kids.
right. And these kids grew up with technology. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they know more than, I mean, I have to have my grandson reset half my text.
Well,
A,
look at what
because I'm
happened
not,
just with my volume.
see, I'm saying these kids, they grew up with this.
Yeah.
They know. I mean, my grandson, he's in, well, he'll be going in first grade, and he plays on, I mean, they have the computer lab. We didn't even have a computer lab, and neither did my kid when he went to school. So they're learning. I mean, so at 15, he knows how to break through firewalls.
Yeah. Now, Krama, you have that. If they have to review the CPS cases from Tennessee, do they have to also open the COS cases from California? I think that he wants them to open the Tennessee case, and I think he's referring to the 2023, because the 2022 was actually, that's, asked and answered. I mean, that was why that one didn't go very far, is because they know that it was already investigated. They know what the details of that were. We have heard varying stories on it, but because that was not involving an adult, they wouldn't open that again, I wouldn't think, because the trauma, I think, is from being re-traumatized.
Right.
That's just my opinion, though. I mean, that's just what I think. I think that situation is just following this poor kid around, and I think that he just can't get away from it. So,
Yep.
it's just his response to that was like, I don't want to talk about it.
Well, he's tired of talking about it. Sebastian is
Right.
tired.
Yeah.
After a while, you just want to heal, I would imagine.
Mhm. Yep. And I'm sure his mom is tough as nails, and she's probably helped him, overcome some of those things. Not
Sure.
dismiss it, but learn how to at least function in that realm.
That's right.
Because she's a tough nut.
He is.
So, for this abandoning investigations, basically they'd have to go through and say, if this is just a practice, we would expect you to, give us some evidence beyond Sebastian's case, like, are there other unresolved missing persons cases, similar complaints from other families, internal reports, prior lawsuits, disciplinary records, statistics, what you got? So the complaint itself does not identify those comparative cases. So what I find really interesting too is that they are throwing these allegations and these claims into these complaints, but they don't tell us, and it might come out in a motion to dismiss, it'll be their defense, but they don't tell us, like, how do you know what their policy was? And how are you saying that it's a violation of their policy, but you're not telling us what their policy is? Do you plan on writing that down at any point? Because that's going to be the basis of your complaint. Is you're saying they violated policy? Well, or their policies are set up basically to violate Seth? Well, tell
Right.
us what it is. So and they have to prove. He's saying that Craddock and Carter violated those policies, but Sumner County set them in place. I hope this is kind of helping explain some of this.
I appreciate it because I don't know the legal civil thing at all. I could do criminal stuff upside down, but civil, nope.
Yeah. Oh, EquiSearch. Are you saying they offered to go back? Summer Girl?
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, Choo Choo. That was, yep. I think that it was nice.
Summer Girl, what happened when they offered to go back? Did they tell them no? Did they say wait a while? Did they? I mean, I know that they want to come back to Summer Wells too, or they're willing. I just don't know if I don't. I didn't know that. I love EquiSearch.
Yeah, Choo Choo. That's been my. It took me a few days to catch on to that with the Tennessee 2022. Yeah. Once I heard the Q&A, I was just. It, it took me a minute because of the way he said it, and then I went back and read the complaints, and I thought, oh, that makes sense because he probably did something because they're talking about his behavior in school. So he probably did something, and you know, Daddy Good Times went in there and said, well, this is probably why. And as soon as you say that, bloop, there goes the hotline
Right.
because they have to.
I mean, circus. It could be. It could have been a new incident, but it wasn't. Right. I mean, even if they didn't have jurisdiction, they could have called California and asked them to investigate.
Yeah.
And then Seth told us it was a much older child, and then we found out it wasn't. So that makes a big difference right there. And the way that they investigate. One's a juvenile report and one's felony.
Yeah, and I think that they have a duty to actually check to make sure that what they heard from Seth and what they're trying to get out of Sebastian is that this is not that it really was a kid. Let's go get the whole story. We have to get the whole story. We need to make sure that this kid didn't move to Tennessee with him, or it wasn't a cousin who was hanging out with him in Tennessee flew out for vacation and he's living next door to him now. They have to check up on all that stuff just to make sure that the coast is clear.
Right. Because child safety is supposed to be their number one job.
Yep. So here's where we got to blame Craddock. So Seth, here he's, paragraph 42 for anybody who has the complaint. This is what I said earlier was that, he's saying that Eric Craddock is the policymaker. Well, but Sonny Weatherford was the sheriff when Sebastian first went missing. But, so this, individually, as, Eric Craddock individually, it'll be interesting to see what they come back with on that. But he's saying that, he's the decision maker and the policy maker. So, Craddock isn't merely another employee. He's the guy who makes the rules, and therefore his official decisions can become the county's decisions. So,
doesn't he have a boss like a city manager or not? I don't know. He would have to. Everybody answers to somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know, like commissioners, and I'm not really sure how their structure is there.
I'll have to look. I really don't know. I'm curious.
Yeah, I don't remember. I remember the commissioners, the county commissioners, but I don't remember what the hierarchy is there.
I don't either.
Huh. I'm sure we probably have a local that can.
Oh, yeah.
Surprise that. Reading through it, they have the timing incorrectly stated. Not sure if that was from. The number of years was wrong. You mean the age? Choo-choo?
Yes. Originally, I remember because Seth wanted that child prosecuted, and they weren't going to prosecute him because of the age, and Seth kept saying, I can't remember now, but I feel like he said he was a teenager. Maybe I'm
Yeah,
wrong.
I think I
Was
know
it?
what she's
Okay.
talking about. He said he was 11 or 12
Yes.
when
Yeah.
I
And
think Sebastian's.
Sebastian was much younger, but then we found out that's not accurate. So,
Yeah, and I think that yeah, when Sebastian was being questioned, I think that he said that he thought he was 11 or 12 or when
yep.
it happened or something like that. So he was a little, because I think they would have already been, would they have already been in Tennessee by then or close to when he was 12? Um, so so yeah, this is where this is why Craddock was named as the final policymaker, and that's possibly because it could possibly avoid them needing to prove a long history of identical cases, but if they can only if they can like challenge that decision that can be tied to a policymaker under like governing law that would be a constitutional violation, so they can try to pin something on him to say, well, they were just, this was his policy and they were following it
Right.
as deputies. So here's some questions for Seth, which will in the Craddock policy. So, did Craddock actually make these specific decisions? Um, like I said, there's Sonny in there. Was he the final? Who makes these policies? I mean, is it just he can just create a memo and decide we're good to go? I'm sure that these, they're the red tape in these situations is endless. So, and they have city attorneys, and you know, this is not something that Eric can just sit down with a feather pen and change rules because he doesn't like Seth Rogers.
Exactly.
So, um, and then well, we need to know what it was that he's saying actually violated his constitutional rights, and then figure out where those came from. So, yeah. And so, did those decisions actually cause Sebastian's continuing disappearance or Seth's alleged constitutional injury? And that, where he actually kind of blames Sumner County for causing Sebastian's disappearance, is one that I will never understand. I don't know how he got there. I don't know how his thought process got there. But we also know that this attorney filed that paperwork with Sebastian's full name on it. So we don't know what we're going to get with this guy.
Right.
So, but simply saying, Craddock is sheriff does not necessarily answer every one of those questions. So this is going to be this is going to be an uphill battle for him, I think.
Yeah.
So, and they use these words, the moving force requirement. So, I mean, that's kind of the chain right there is, the phrase appears repeatedly in that complaint, which the moving force is actually what they're calling the causation. So it's not enough to prove that Sumner County had a bad policy. It's not enough to prove that Seth suffered an injury. He has to connect those. And the defense can attack every arrow in that chain right there. So,
Right. Has he found a Tennessee attorney to step in yet? I haven't seen that
the AG?
because I noticed that the court told him he had to attach a licensed attorney from Tennessee.
Oh, yeah. I was in there today and I didn't see where they have named one.
Yeah, I didn't see that anybody made an appearance or entered an appearance.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the motion, the order that I saw today
Uh-huh.
actually was filed back in July, and it was just showing up, in the last few days. So that pacer's really far behind, so it's hard to tell.
Oh yeah.
It seems like it kind of comes in batches, where all of a sudden you'll have a whole list of things that are added, and it's like one line at a time for every little move that they make. So I was kind of clicking through it, but I was mostly looking at that motion and just seeing if anything else changed. But I didn't see I didn't see anything in particular, but it doesn't mean I didn't overlook it because I was
Yeah, same.
gathering moss on that big mistake. I was like, oh gosh, where'd this guy come from? So,
Yeah.
all right, let's see where we're at on this. Uh, okay, so this is kind of what I was talking about in the beginning, that the Monell doctrine, this claim, doesn't create that constitutional right. So this is where that method comes in. It's kind of like we have to test all of these, all of these claims in order to be able to prove that there was a constitutional violation.
Right.
So this is what's set in place to basically prove that. So it is really important because the defense can argue, there's no underlying constitutional violation in the first place. So if the underlying Section 1983 claim fails, then there may be nothing for Monell to attach to. So that's why the success or failure of Seth's due process and state created danger theory matters enormously. So he
True.
has to figure he has to figure out how to attach those. Oh, okay, so the negligence does not equal the Monell claim. So Seth has to prove that these investigators made mistakes, and he has to prove, if he says they should have followed a lead or the communication should have been better and more officers, they should have been more officers should have been assigned. That could support negligence, but it really doesn't meet the threshold for Monell. So then he's going to lose his constitutional violation claim as well. So I'm just not really sure how he plans on doing this because these complaints were so sparse, and we don't even know what he thinks these policies are. So, and even at that, there's the qualified immunity. So, if these guys are on the fly, they're looking for a kid, he has to, if he's saying that he doesn't know anything, they're not telling him anything, they don't know, he doesn't know what leads were followed up on, which ones weren't followed up, he's going to have to name those. Exactly which tip didn't make it through.
And he's going to have to explain, which maybe I'm wrong, you might be able to define it, why the tips went to Dog the Bounty Hunter instead of TBI. So, how does he know? What am I trying to say? Dog the Bounty Hunter didn't follow up on the tips either. And did they turn those tips over to TBI to be investigated or Sumner? I mean, we don't know that. He threw so much mud in here with at night that I think that's going to be a problem because the tip line is all screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense? I don't even know if
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because it's going to be hard for him to say, well, you didn't follow up on tips. Well, precisely which tip?
Right. The one that you
And
sent to Dog? I mean, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And you start putting those billboards up on the screen for the jury to see, where it takes a poke at the Proudfoots and it's got a big picture of Sebastian's face and a bunch of verbiage that you can't even read at 75 miles an hour or 80 if you're like me, and
Sure.
1-800 call dog.
Right.
So when you hire a company to deter all of the tips because you want to keep them to yourself, or you want, and he always says, like, even the video that, or the replay that I was watching last night, he was talking about how he's following up on tips and um, chasing down leads, and I'm thinking, where are these coming from?
I can tell you where Nick's not quiet. Nick's just being quiet. He can, they can pretend like Nick is not doing anything till the cows come home.
Hmm.
I don't believe that for a minute.
Yeah, I don't know, because he seems to have distanced himself, and that actually happened, I think, around Pigfest, it seemed. was when, because I remember Jen, the astrology lady,
Uh-huh.
and Mama Rissa, they were on a live, and it was right around Pig Fest time. Maybe it was after. And and they basically, Mom Marissa was very clear about it. She's like, yeah, we were trying to help, and Nick asked us to investigate this and that and look this up and follow up on that. And then we'd give him the information, and then he would use it as if it was his own.
Yeah,
Yeah, you got it right there.
that's not okay.
Bingo.
Oh, Kramer, you asked a good question. Why is that not Rico? Oh,
Yeah.
because it is. That's
Yeah.
why. That's
Hmm.
what you do when you're doing something like that is you blame other people to deflect, in my humble opinion, Nicholas.
Yeah. And this is almost like, I just kind of think of it like what Seth did was he wanted to control the narrative, and as a parent of a missing child, I can't even imagine. And he wanted to control the narrative, and he wanted to be included in everything, and you gotta give that to him. I mean, any parent would do that.
Sure.
Um, should be doing that, I should say. And but he just wanted to control that narrative, and I think that he became empowered, and the arrogance set in when Tony came on board, and I think Tony really lit that fire under him and kind of made them as if you know having them in your circle was a gift. If
Yes.
you had to be some certain special kind of person to even get to be able to even text or send an email to Seth. They put him on this pedestal, and as if he's some god. And so what he did was, he controlled this narrative so much that he was trying to box in all this information to keep it all to himself and to keep it within at night and with Tony. And but he actually ended up boxing himself out.
He did.
Trying to protect his own stuff. Actually, he boxed himself out. When you create so many rules and guidelines and people just start walking away because they're like, well, I can't pierce that fence, so I'm out. And next thing you
Right.
know, you're standing there in that fence all by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There's nobody around to open the gate.
No, and they
Nobody's
don't.
coming in.
I mean, at some point, they did tell Seth, per him, that he needed to communicate via text. That could be, and I don't know, because he yells all the time.
Hmm. Yeah.
I don't think that's an effective, that's a nonverbal form of communication and it's not effective, but it's something. And
Right.
he flat said, I'm never going to text them, email them, and that's not good.
And not one. I'm not putting anything in writing. Is what you're telling me.
Right,
Um, and that could have just been like, what? Because for a while there, he was saying, "Well, I talk to them every day," and I'm thinking,
right,
Lord, who's sitting at that desk that has to pick up that phone every day? So maybe that was why it was reduced to text. We don't know how many. In the absence of sanity, was he calling them every day, 2 or 3 times a day? What are you doing to find my son? And maybe that may have just been the screening process, of if something comes through, something needs to be said, hey, give me a call, or hey, I'll call you in 5 minutes. That could have been just a
sure.
control monitor on him because we know. So,
I know that my concern with him, I mean, and honestly, I can see him doing it. I don't know that he did it. It's just my opinion, is that he left a message on a voicemail that could have been construed as threatening. Like, you better tell me what's going on or else.
hmm
Well, huh, they don't have to talk to you after that. It's all in writing.
yeah, I mean, if they transcribed Blanche's voicemail,
Right.
jeez. Mm,
Yep.
so,
Or Blanche.
uh, no update. Lawyer's been advised. Okay, yep. You look to see there's no attorney on there yet, and that's
Okay.
more procedural.
I mean, and Pacer is slow. Like,
Hmm.
it used to take a long time to get my offender stuff up there.
Summer Girl, how do we not know if they talk to the Proudfoots? Well, I think that that's, I don't know. I mean, I've heard that they talked to Katie and Chris, but I don't know. We don't know for sure. Um, and
It
if they
could
are, what are they talking about?
it could be too because that's where he went missing from. So maybe they are in communication with them.
Hmm.
Asking questions, follow up questions, things like
Yeah.
that. I mean, it
Do
doesn't
you
have to.
recognize this trash can?
Sure. I mean, maybe they are talking to them like that. 'Cause he went missing from there, so it would be reasonable to think that that's why they're talking to them to follow up and get information. I mean, this is not, according to Sumner, a cold case, from what I heard.
Yeah, and it's so hard to tell because we don't see anything, and we just kind
Nothing.
of, I mean, we just have to go by what they say, and I think that's the most. I mean, just even
Sure.
as a part of the true crime community, I don't even live there, and it's frustrating.
Right.
So, yeah, Summer Girl, we don't know if they, I mean, there's rumor, of course, that they've been talking to them, and and they may be, it may be exclusive to Seth. Um, it, they could have reasons for they may be only be talking to Katie. They may be, you know, not talking. We don't know who they're talking to, but and even at that, they can say, well, you know, this is our parent contact, and she doesn't scream at me through a speaker um, in a parking lot. So this is this is the parent I'm choosing as the, as the family representative is Katie.
Sure.
And so they can explain why. But Seth's gonna have to, and that's gonna blow it out too. Because if he says, well, as a policy, you're shortchanging the family. And Katie can be like, well, I talk to him like once a month. They're
Sure.
they're that blows the theory, but then that also shows that there's favoritism and bias. So yeah, we're the failure to train defend or failure to train claim was in there. So I don't know how he got a hold of their training policy, but according to this complaint, they seem to be familiar with their policies and all their training materials and things like that. And so the county can just say, prove it.
Right.
I
Exactly.
mean, that's their defense is prove it. So, what training did Sumner County actually provide, and what specific training are you saying is missing, and how do we know that the training was inadequate?
Right.
So, and if there was a history of similar violations that put the county on notice, they'll want to look into that. How did the alleged training deficiency still cause a constitutional violation? So we got to wrap right around to that. It's hard to you get down into that rabbit hole and you think, yeah, if they're not training these people, if their officers are not trained properly, and then you get down to that constitutional violation, well, there it goes again.
Right. Where's the harm? Because
Yeah.
you have to show the harm, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Because somebody, not doing, if somebody just only did 5 of the 8 hours that they were supposed to attend a specific training, that doesn't cause a constitutional violation against
No.
Seth and Sebastian. So, discovery of their policies and training materials, their personnel records, comparable cases, those are extremely important, and that's what they're going to have to try to figure out, and who's in possession of that information.
Exactly.
So that's where that quote unquote, upon information and belief, when they use that statement, even though it's not fairy dust, when they use that upon information and belief, they're basically saying, this is what we believe based on what we've seen, and we know that you have the information to prove it, so they'll, just ask for, they'll request the proof. Seth were to win these settlements, would he okay any proceeds? Oh, and the C&Ds. I think that C&Ds are, uh, those came from an attorney, I think, didn't they? And it wasn't Joe. Um, I think that that's going to be more of a character because anybody that they sent C&Ds to, even it looks bad on him, and I think that it's more of like I said, a character thing where, if you're so worried about finding your son, why would you send a C&D to somebody who is searching on, like literally boots on the ground or high heels on the ground searching? Um, so that kind of shows, like where his priorities are. I don't think it'll really affect this in the long run, but it'll at least put that little, if it makes it in front of a jury or a fact finder, I think that'll just kind of at least tweak their mind a little bit to look at him and say, who does that?
Right.
You know? I mean, if he sent a C&D to, you know, somebody that was like, I don't know, say running around in their neighborhood and running drones over their house and, whatnot, that would be a little bit different. But to send somebody a C&D just because
They
they
don't
don't
like
like
you.
them,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, this is not about personalities. This is about finding the child, and you know, I would think that somebody like Clue and Cletus, if they got one, I think isn't that the one that she like hung on her wall?
Yes, I love it. It's hanging
Yeah.
up right
So
behind her.
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Can you imagine when if Sebastian comes back and meets Clue and Cletus and he sees that trophy on the wall that says "Don't look for my kid"?
yeah. And don't
So
mention him.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You don't know him. You just because you're local, mind your business and stay away from thinking about my son that's missing.
yeah. My son,
Yes.
my son. So as far as the settlements, Krama, with this is going to get interesting because Sebastian turns 18 in what, 3.5 months?
Yep. December 7th.
Yep. So see that this right now is currently Seth suing on behalf of Sebastian. So once he turns 18, the lawsuit doesn't go away. But in order for it to continue, they would have to. I don't know if they would have to. If it's a conservatorship to be able to continue, in his name. If God willing, if he shows up after he turns 18, then he can decide whether or not he wants to take over the case himself. But at that point, he would be an adult. Once this is, and if Seth were to win, no, he wouldn't. He wouldn't have to split anything with Katie because she wasn't in on it. Stats. How many kids have been, reported missing from that county during the same period? How many have been found? I just don't hear of a lot of kids disappear. Wasn't there one that went that like was it a runaway? It seemed like they were lost and found like very shortly, not too long after Sebastian disappeared because everybody's like, how that kid get found so fast, and we still can't find Sebastian.
I do remember.
Yeah, it was like before we knew he was, like the alert went out and found him. Fantastic. We like to hear that. All right. So, when we were talking about connecting the Monell with that constitutional right, the 1983. So he has to, that's where he needs to connect those two things. So, what constitutional right was actually violated? What is he saying was his constitutional right to begin with? I'm not really sure, actually. Um, but, Sumner County had, so he has to prove what those policies and customs were. Um, let's see what else here. Yeah, and then he has to prove that whatever that policy was actually caused that constitutional violation, which I'm sure we'll learn what that is at some point. And then on top of it, it caused the claimed injury. So it's just not. I don't know how he's going to get there because these complaints are just so sparse. Um, so I don't know. I mean, it's just some, if there's like one break in some of this information, the whole thing is going to topple down. I mean, that's just it's just the unfortunate part of this whole thing is it's going to be a big distraction from finding Sebastian.
I'm looking at the website right now for Tennessee missing kids. There's a 6-year-old from Knoxville missing. There's Summer Wells. There's a child who's one from Knoxville, and the rest of them are all teenagers. And it looks like, just from what I'm reading, and I could be wrong, that these are custody fights. They're not kidnapping cases, except for the teenagers. And it looks to me like they may just be runaways, or it doesn't specify if they're from foster care and on run. I mean, none of that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, months ago there was this girl that was supposedly missing and in danger, and come to find out she ran away from
Yes.
from the home, the group home, and there were 6 of them on the run. Now
Yep.
those summer girl, the 30 kids that they found in Hendersonville trafficking, was that were all 30 of those kids from Tennessee or Hendersonville, or is that just where they were housed? Do we know? Because that was actually, that involved like didn't that involve like they found somebody at a motel, like one of the men with,
I'm thinking,
trying to
yes.
remember.
I'm gonna see. I remember that case because we talked about it at work.
Yeah, I'm getting that one mixed up with the one that had, because that's not the same one that, because there was kind of like a little ring, and I think this one was different, because remember the one had the Gallatin police officer and the commissioner, and like there was a few of them that were all busted, but I think that situation was separate from this one with the 30 kids. I don't think that was the same,
Can't
because
believe it.
that little situation with, there was like 4 or 5 of them that were arrested, and that thing took on new legs. I mean, it spidered like crazy, but I think that there were some adults involved in that, and then some
Hmm.
familial.
That's
So
true.
yeah. So yeah. So this is basically like Seth's little checklist. So kind of, I guess what we need to really watch for discovery is, did Seth find similar missing persons investigations that were run the same way? What were he's going to have to figure out what the actual written policies are, and do those policies contradict the complaint? Training records. Did Carter and other investigators actually receive training, and how much? So we're going to see those, or we should, if it makes it past the gate. Communication records. Who communicated with Seth, when, and about what? I mean, we do see some one-way conversation, that involves a microphone and a speaker, and cake. I mean, but they're going to have to display all of that, and just say, hey, this is how many times we talked to him. Um, you know, we ended up reducing it down to texting because we can't just take random phone calls. We're not equipped for that. I mean, you cannot have, if you don't have the staffing actually
Right.
to to actually like cover everything that is adequately. I mean, we don't know what kind of funding they have. It doesn't seem to be a poor community, but I'm not sure. I'm not from there, but comparatively, it seems like it's a nice little community. I mean, it does look really nice.
Yes.
Um, I mean, even if they are short on funds, they sure take good care of it because it really looks good. And I just when they pan through the area, it just looks well kept, and that doesn't mean that you know pretty flowers makes it for a good sheriff. I'm not saying that, but we just don't know, what kind of budget cuts they've had, or um, we don't know their business. I mean, I'm sure that there's some creators that know their business because they have taken the time to dig into it, but. So they're going to look for those interagency records. What did Sumner County, TBI, DCS, FBI, and CPIT actually share, which kind of goes back to that DCS complaint. Craddock's roles, what decisions did he personally make? He was the desk guy. I think he was, until Sonny passed away, I think he was kind of at the desk or, in front of the screen for the couple times that he did speak. And then the investigative activity. Was the investigation actually abandoned or simply no longer visible to Seth and the public? And those records could make or break the Monell theory. And, it could make it stronger or it could destroy it. I mean, if they come across some things that, are questionable and, if they can show where they just shut everything down because they didn't want certain things out in the public, we don't, from the outside looking in and out of frustration, we're like, why are you not doing this? Did you do, I think we all have the same questions that Seth has.
Oh, sure.
Quite honestly.
But we just present them differently. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I know I've touched on this before of, when you have when Tony came in, it just seemed like there was a shift. And I remember even just the shift in, you can see, like, looking back at the old interviews, and especially I keep referring to Pascal because it seemed like he was more forward facing than a lot of the other ones.
Right.
Because Pascal can just keep things moving and just keep plowing through, and he just does his best to try to keep them on track. And you can tell when Seth was leaving the rails, you can tell when Pascal's, the way that he would kind of, okay, yeah, brother. He just
Right.
Seth's, the train is leaving, and that's when you hit the mute. Oh, so anyway, he has to prove that this system, that this whole thing caused violation of his rights. So he's got a big road ahead of him. And then, we also have, like this cast of characters. This really shouldn't be relevant to this situation, but unfortunately, this could become a thing because, even though they could say, we did kind of have to scale back, and they might be able to say why. They might have to prove why. Funding sketchy
I
parts
think
mostly.
every parent of a missing child probably complains about that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Why are you not looking for my kid? What are you doing? Well, and the other cases, they don't stop rolling in. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Cases just don't stop. And it's unfortunate because I know every parent wants their kid to be the sole focus. And I would be selfish like that. Absolutely. But I also know they can't.
Yeah. I mean, my kids are the most important in everybody's world, including yours.
Sure.
It's
Mhm.
and if you don't believe that, I will let you know. So yeah, it's not good, when you have this whole crew of renegades coming in here, and like early in the case, Sumner communicated with Seth regularly. Then the case became surrounded by these outside quote-unquote investigators and private groups and creators and competing tip lines and public accusations and leaks and protests. And then Sumner County, they became kind of restrictive on what investigative information they gave to Seth. And I mean, it appears that way.
Right.
It actually appears that way. Because I figured out that timeline, just listening to him, like, they haven't communicated with me in 18 months. Well, look back 18 months. What happened?
Right. And I mean, I'm going to reiterate, they cannot at all talk to a felon about an open investigation that's on active supervision. And that would be Nick. They can talk to Dog all day long. they won't give him private information. He's a felon. He hasn't been on supervision for how many years?
Mm-hmm.
Nick is not, if you're on parole, you are not supposed to be part of any legal investigation at all, unless you're the subject. So that is going to be a problem for him, I think, how he's
Mm-hmm.
going to explain that, because not only did he associate, he signed a contract with them.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a problem. Yep. And when he's saying, it's their policy. Well, they don't have policies that we're not allowed to, that we're not going to communicate with families,
No.
and so, they can just say our policy is not, not to not communicate with families, but they could say, hey, we had to take a position on this.
Yes.
And, there was there's Nick, there's at night, there's dog, there's creators, and we would need, there would need to be some actual evidence connecting those events to Sumner County's decisions to cut back. But I think that would be a no-brainer. I think it would be really easy for them to do that.
Absolutely.
Considering, I mean, I know that, per Crime Time Buzz, people were sending her tips and she was sorting through them and sending them to whomever, Sumner County or Nick or Dog, because she thinks that Dog is really thing. So right there's your problem. It's sort
Right.
of, on its face, because and they could say, well, what tips do you have that we that we missed?
Right.
And I know that some of the stuff won't even matter in this complaint and in this filing in itself, but because
Well,
it really doesn't apply. But since we're talking about it, that's just the way, if he's going to make these accusations, they do have a right to respond.
and what if not that this happened, but what if some of those tips pinpointed Seth and they called him to Nick? Do you think those got passed on? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so they filtered those tips. Seth's gonna have a big problem in explaining that one, I feel like.
And yeah, especially if they have records showing that, investigative information
Hmm.
supplied to Seth or and people around him, they published it, they distorted it, they disclosed it, transmitted it to creators. We know about the 2 a.m. TikTok seances that were going on. And these things were used to generate public accusations. I just saw somebody who, won't acknowledge that she's green team, but she is and was or is maybe still, but was getting footage from Nick. Just, I don't know, in the last few days, pointing at the poor guy in the yellow jacket at Texas Roadhouse again. And I'm thinking, oh,
If I was that guy in the yellow jacket, I would sue the hell out of all of them.
yeah,
Excuse my language.
yep.
You're not going to accuse me of having something to do with a missing kid.
Well, and what's interesting about that one in particular is that those accusations came out, and by that group, and then a couple other people ran with it, and then they actually shut down their own theory and just basically said the guy in the yellow jacket doesn't have anything to do with it. Completely debunked their own
Yeah.
accusations, and now winding back around to it again, and that just shows where the priorities are. Are you
Right.
willing to resurrect and recycle these claims that are false because you even said it yourself? I mean, are we hiding videos to resurrect these claims? It's very disheartening. So, I mean, and I would think that Sumner County probably has a pretty good idea. GW barbecue or responsible for Sebastian's disappearance in a RICO. I don't even remember how that was worded. It's been so long since I read it.
They basically blame Barbecue and Granny for hindering the search, which never happened. They had nothing to do with blocking the search. The person that couldn't get out of his recliner and go search is the one that's complaining the most, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Now, you remember, yeah, I mean, I would have to go back and look to see what Seth actually wrote in that, in his declaration or affidavit, whatever he attached to that RICO, to see, um, what they wrote and then attached his signature to. That would be interesting to revisit that. Um,
Yep.
but yeah, they made all kinds of accusations. And what's interesting about that is, when I read it the first time, 5 weeks into who's Sebastian Rogers for me, I mean, I was late to the game, and I'm reading this thing, and I thought, this is very convoluted. I have no idea what they're talking about. There's no attachments. The next thing I know, I'm watching Mr. E's Crimecast, trying to figure out what they're even talking about. And it seems like it took 10 hours and 6 episodes to get all the information out. And then come to find out, the attachments, the exhibits were not even at the courthouse. They were posted on their website. And that's when I was like, all right, wait a minute. Something is wrong with this whole
Okay.
situation here. And it didn't
It's
make
a-
sense because I was listening. Well, actually, you know what caught me? It was so funny. What caught me was because I was desperately looking for information about Sebastian. Just him, the case. I didn't know anything about these creators. I saw, we have Dog the Bounty Hunter, and I thought, well, I don't know what this is all about, but he made his little tour, on Coffin Daffer and whoever else, and so I was kind of absorbing that stuff, and not knowing who's who as far as creators. I found Brittany, and this was before the RICO, so I found Brittany's channel. And, big headlines, Sebastian Rogers, we're going to be deep diving into this case. And I was watching it and I thought, okay, I'm like an hour and a half into this, and all I'm hearing is about a car accident in a front yard. Some poor guy died in her front yard, and somebody's talking about it. And there was some lady that was Nana, whatever. She's on there. She's making digs. There's some lady
Right.
with a cat, the little cat symbol, her little, and she's screaming. I have no idea what's going on, and I shut it down. And so then, like a couple days later, I thought, okay, here's a new one, So I, turned her video back or her live back on, and she starts going through it all again, and it's all drama, and I am not true crime. Had no idea what was going on behind the scenes with this thing. I couldn't figure out why. This was on, yeah, reality was the cat. Yep, I figured that out later. I think I may have, oh yeah, because I was like, why is this lady screaming? But anyway, so I watched for a little while, and I still distinctly, because thought, I'll turn this on, and while I was going to bed, and it was the same thing as the last time. So I thought, she's not even talking about Sebastian, so I never went back. Then, like a week or two later, was when the RICO came out, and I saw her name on it. Well, for me, I was like, she is the last. Who is this person? Because my two experiences with watching her, trying to watch her, has been nothing but her slamming somebody named Granny, and complaining about all these people with the Sebastian in her title. I got zero information out of her. It was all drama. Why is she a plaintiff? It was so
Right.
confusing to me. Like, who is this lady? It was just like, there's a whole group of women on this panel who are just, all I'm hearing about is some car accident in somebody's front yard, and somebody's talking about it, and it had nothing to do with Sebastian. All of a sudden, she's a plaintiff. And
Yeah.
I thought, something is not right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was my whoop. I better look at this a little bit closer, and that's when I started to kind of backpedal a little bit, started looking around and listening a little bit more of what's fact and what's crazy, and there's a pretty good indicator right there on your screen. So
Yeah.
yeah, so anyway, they can. It won't take much for them, and this is not necessarily a defense for them. But if they say, yeah, we did restrict it, but that's not a violation of his constitutional rights, we had to restrict it as an individualized investigative decision. It's not like it's a deliberate indifference. It's which is what they're claiming. They didn't say, we don't like Seth. We don't like his braid. You know, it's none of that. They can say, here's the reasons why, because we stopped disclosing sensitive information to him because of all these reasons. And
There,
if there's any truth to all these contracts, then without a doubt.
they have to protect the integrity of the investigation, right?
And the
I mean,
public. Yeah.
and Seth was not cooperative at, with Tony. I'm not saying he said now he's working with Nick Mick, which is the best thing that he could ever do. But I don't know if anyone remembers, but he said he was not going to work with them because they would not print out flyers with dog and manhunt one or whatever on them. Well, they can't because the DOJ funds Nick Mick, and they can't do that, right? They can only put the official FBI flyer out. So now Seth says he would like to work with them. So I'm hoping that Seth is finally going to pull it together and work with people that can help him rein it in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Seth needs somebody to give him guidance and support, and
Yeah.
it's not the people he's associating with.
Mm-mm. Well, and I don't, I mean, you can kind of trace back where some of the connections were. I don't know if anybody would admit to it now, but some of those things kind of slipped out. But that's me watching on replay too. It's kind of
Sure.
like reinventing, or
Well,
investigating a car crash. You can go back with your measuring tape, and 6 months ago, you're like, oh yeah, he did get introduced to Dog the Bounty Hunter from so and so.
right, which crazy. And then remember when Seth didn't want to go, he refused to talk to the police without Tony. Well, obviously, and I know Tony's dead and he can't defend himself. That doesn't mean I still have to like him. I mean, you know, I don't want to talk ill of the dead, but he controlled that. There was no reason for Tony to be a part of any of those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a party to the case. So Seth is going to have to explain that crap too.
Well, Tony did claim a lot of times when I would, like, of course, ask Al, asking him questions about the case, and he'd say, I don't really know much about the case. I don't know
But
anything about that. I'm just here to support Seth. Well, Seth, I thought that's what you were supposed to be doing, was speaking on behalf of Seth, so that
yeah,
he didn't have to get bombarded with questions. You take your little talking points and you go up there and say, "This is what we know. This is what we've heard. Last thing we've got." Um, if you're gonna go on a social media tour and go from chat to chat, and have you know people sliding into the chat saying, "Oh, hey Tony, what about this or that?" Well, since it's out there, I might as well talk about it. They know that was going on because there were
sure.
actually people who went into the police department and had conversations with them, and to try to figure out where some information came from, and come to find out it was a guy in the red shirt.
Uh,
Um,
wow.
so, yeah, yeah. So anyway, that they definitely don't have a policy or practice of failing to maintain communication with families of missing persons, and even at that, all they have to do is say, family A, B, and C, we have regular communication. Katie, Chris, we have regular communication. Seth, communication became restricted after particular events occurred.
Exactly. And that's how I see that as coming out.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
don't, I really don't. I mean, in my department, I live with corruption sometimes, right? So I don't see that with Sumner. I really don't. But
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see them as this big corrupt department that's all conspired against Seth.
No. There is something weird about it, though. I mean, and I don't think it's against Seth, but there's something weird about it because just not
Oh,
having any
yeah.
information, I mean, there's just something stirring in the background because the things that they did put out there don't connect. So that's, for me, I'm the why person. Like, why is that happening? Why is it? I'm looking for where's the gaps, what's missing, because
Sure.
that's where you find your truth. That's kind of sometimes where the gaps
Hmm.
are, and because you gotta like, why is there a gap actually? Um, so anyway, that's kind of where he's going to be sitting with that. Even if Seth proves, hey, they excluded me, and even if they try, it doesn't necessarily mean, well, here, no countywide policy or custom excluding families. We were just talking about that. But even if he proves, they excluded me, the next question isn't how much do we owe them, and then that would be your question right there. Excluded you from what? What? What did we exclude you from? Because you know that's an extremely important question, because being the father of a missing child doesn't mean that he has a federal constitutional right to their investigative strategy, confidential information, every tip, suspect information, forensic results. That's not a constitutional right. So he has to excluded you from what? What do you think that you were entitled to? So, the complaint itself alleges that a protected familial liberty, that's what he said. Yeah, familial liberty interest. That's a mouthful. And then it attempts to connect that investigative conduct to the constitutional interest. And, that's a big leap. You can't just say
Yep.
Sumner wasn't communicating with me, and there's, you have to explain yourself.
Right.
So, I don't know. And, it could collide with his own public conduct, that's for sure. This is, evidence could show that, if Sumner County can authenticate and establish in this litigation that, some of the things that were done by Seth and his team and the people, especially if he contracted with them and he has an engagement letter, or I mean, that's all going to become relevant if they didn't trust that. I mean, they don't have to give you information if they don't know where it's going to go. And we all know that their systems were hacked and all
Sure.
kinds of threats and national security, because they're so important and they had all this information. And so if he characterizes restriction as abandonment, then you know that's a
Right.
different context for deliberate indifference. It doesn't automatically prove that Sumner acted properly, but it could provide a legitimate investigative explanation for conduct that the complaint portrays, some type of abandonment, but they may have a good explanation for it.
I feel like Seth wants information that he's not ever going to get until Sebastian's found. I think he wants to know what they want, what they know, so he can run his own private investigation or whatever it is that he's wanting to do, but he's
Mm-hmm.
never going to get that.
Yeah.
They are never going to give him or Katie and Chris for that matter all of the intel. They're just not going to do it. That's not how they operate.
Yeah. Yeah. So, kind of in a nutshell, I guess the simplest way to explain this whole elongated thing that we just did was, you know, Seth's Monell argument is, you know, this wasn't just a bad detective, it was a bad system. And that's what he has to go after, is the whole system. And then Sumner County is basically going to say, no, you're taking disagreements about one investigation, calling them a county-wide policy. And then the
Mhm.
judge is going to ask, can you prove the system itself caused a violation of a federal constitutional right? And now we're right back at the start. And that's the Monell fight. He has to win that fight before he can go to that Section 1983.
I haven't figured out yet which right they violated. Because, I mean, which, do you know? Does it, I,
What was it, 14? Well, what he's claiming is, basically that, violated his rights as, as a father, of his relationship with his son. And, so that's kind of where he was going with that whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah, just excluding him, and that he has a constitutional right to the relationship with his child, and but Seth's challenges with that is that what he's trying to say is that these things that happened, especially the DCS, these things that happened caused Sebastian to disappear. So that's a
Right.
big leap. Nothing that we can, I mean, Sumner County not communicating with Seth didn't cause Sebastian's disappearance.
No.
And so I think that it's so gray, and that's why I thought I'm just going to start breaking this down one belief. I don't even want to say claim, one
I
thought process at a
appreciate it.
time, because we have this case and that case, there's case law in here, and there's statutes, and there's policies, and and then on top of it you have DCS in the midst of that, where not just like the sheriff, you had a change of regime at the sheriff's department, but with DCS, they had some change in policies mid-flight. So as I'm trying to research their policies to see, because Seth didn't tell us in his complaint, because that would take like effort, and so since they didn't tell us what the policy is, so we can read it and say, oh, yep, we can see where that connection is, and they violated their own policy, and here's the verbiage of the policy, and this is what they did. So yeah, clearly that's a violation, and that's not what they have to put in the complaint, but it sure would have been nice. And so as
Okay.
I'm researching it, I'm looking at these. I'm like, okay, so this was effective like January 1st, 2023, and I'm like, dang it! So now I gotta go back and find the one that was effective prior to, because that would be the range of time for the 2022 or the 2022 report to DCS, and then now you're in a different policy zone or procedural zone for another claim. So as these things are evolving, they have to look at what was the policy at that time, and like priority 3 claim or priority 3 investigation.
Right.
They got rid of that in the meantime. So as I'm reading it, I'm thinking, okay, this policy, priority 3, it's the lowest tier. Doesn't mean that they don't, that there still isn't any urgency. They still have a sense of urgency, but it's not like we just found out, about this little girl, and she's in the hospital, we're going right now. I mean, that's not that kind of thing.
Right.
So now they don't have a priority 3. So these things are changing. So you have to like chase these policies around, and what was in effect at that time? What were their practices at that time? Because you can't say, well, things happened in 2025, so we changed our policy for 2026. Seth filed his claim in 2026. No, that you have to go back to the policy that was in place at that time. So, and then also, I kind of touched on the statute of limitations the other day. So that will most likely come into play as well, but I won't go through all that right now. Since we are
Yeah.
already at 2 hours, and I appreciate you hanging in here with me, and I hope this helps at least. Southern Face,
I very much appreciate it. I learned so much from you.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah, it's well, I learn on the criminal side from you. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. So, all right.
All right, Summer Girl, thank you for being here. Southern Feisty. Yeah, I love Tennessee. She said police presence there is high. Funding isn't a big issue, and I think there are sketchy parts, and I think, and consistently, when there's things on the news, it seems to be from my particular area. My ex-in-laws moved to Tennessee years ago, like when my kids were little, and Oneida, I think, is where they moved. Does that sound right? Oneida? And I remember we were going through some of the switchbacks, and my kids were just they're in the back seat, and like I swear they could reach their hand out the window and like touch the houses. Everything was so close, and and there's just all these little pockets that's just gorgeous. I mean, I've always loved Tennessee, and and so many people want to live there, and it
It's
just
beautiful.
it is. Yes, it definitely is. And it was a gold mine, and I think they're finally figuring out that it's a gold mine because I think the prices are going up now. But everybody was moving there because they're like, hey, there's no state tax. But
Right.
moving from other states as a even as a retiree, if you don't need to have a job, if you don't need to be located in a metro area where you have to, go to work or, drive through switchbacks every day to get to work, as a retiree, it was perfect for like my ex in laws because they could live up in the beautiful mountains. It didn't really matter. It just took them 40 minutes to go to the store. But,
Sure.
just all the
That's awesome.
trackers. I just remember all the trackers, like all the neighbors had trackers, and that's what they were driving up into the mountains and driving up the rocks, and oh my gosh, yeah, they had a blast down there. So
I was first
anyway.
acquainted. I mean, we used to go by there. I mean, by there. We used to go to Tennessee a lot, but I noticed even at Summer Wells how beautiful that place is.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I really was like, that is, I've never been, we usually just, went sightseeing or whatever,
Good
but
night,
it's a
Summer.
beautiful, beautiful state.
Yeah,
Gorgeous.
it is. Yeah. Um, okay, well, everybody, thank you so much for being here and hanging in here, and I'll try to extract some more of the information. I don't know if anybody has any questions that can give me some ideas of where anything that is confusing. Yeah, I'm always open to ideas because I do have scads of research and dissecting all this stuff. So if there's anything in particular that somebody needs an explanation on, or if it just seems to be blending, because I think that's the big thing is that it blends. And when we're reading a DCS complaint and we're like, what is this? What does this kid in California have to do with this civil rights? Nothing.
Right.
Absolutely nothing. So that that's where we get kind of wrapped up, and then of course we want Sebastian to come home. So then when you read things like that, it's just takes it to a whole new level of we just didn't want to know this. Not that it doesn't matter, but that was his private situation, and obviously he was trying to deal with that. So anyway, all right,
All
I
right,
am
you
going
guys,
to get going here. Thank you so much.
have a good rest of your night.
Thanks.
See you soon. Bye
Thank you,
bye.
everybody. Bye bye.
Bye.